We're getting the remnants of the hurricane here tonight or today. Well, it came over last night. I think I slept through most of it, and it seems to have cleared up. I don't know if it's just a break or what, but they were calling for 30 millimeters of rain. It seems to me like it was just a light sprinkle, a long sprinkle, but I mean we didn't get anything crazy here last night. It's recycle day today, but I tend to I don't like putting it out in the rain. So if it stays dry, I'll put it a little later. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to wait till next week. There's not that much in there. Well, I guess that's actually fairly substantial for one person over 2 weeks, but everything I buy is recyclable or compostable in some sense. My only thing I really use the garbage for is bags of chips, which I'm trying to not eat, and cheese wrappers, paper towels. It's very, very, very minimal. Um, it's 11 o'clock. I was up today at 8, which is, again, this is a little strange for me. I normally cycle forwards. Um, I was a little bit tired, more tired than usual last night. I think I was emotionally drained from dealing with the driver issue here. I think I figured it out. And so I'm going to do a split blog today for the 27th and 28th. Just because these days, these 2 days are going to be the same day. They're just split by a little bit of sleeping in terms of what I'm doing and the thematic concept underlying the two of them. I'm pretty sure that what was happening was that the MSK SSRV driver was malfunctioning because it required the MSP clock driver and or the MSPQM driver. There's not really any way around it. In order to open Cubase, I need to either install or disable that driver. Sorry, my screensaver just came on there. I can't disable it because I get these fadings in the highs. So I have to install it. And if I have to install it, it seems to be that I have to install the other two as well. There was another another driver I had tried to, a library that I had tried to remove, and it seems like it needs that as well. So I think it's stable. I need to test for the rest of the day, which is the same thing I was doing yesterday. So it runs into itself. I do hope that this issue is resolved in the next couple of hours, and I can get back to making music tomorrow, or even tonight, if I'm convinced that it's stable. Yeah. I just want to add a little rant in here about the political situation in Canada. We had an election last week with the Liberal Party defeating the Conservative Party. I just want to talk a little bit about the media narrative because it's really quite interesting in the sense that it highlights how Canada is a British colony and has a very British political tradition. We still have the two major British political parties here, the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party. It's like a 19th century British political spectrum. We have a sort of an analog to the Labour Party, although it's really nothing at all like it, called the New Democratic Party. The New Democrats are kind of more similar to the American concept of progressivism. But I mean, they're a third party. They looked like they had a better chance this year than they ever did before, but they're back to third party status, very far from any chance of power. The Liberals leapfrogged them from third place to back into first place. But it's funny though because the media narrative. Okay, so the Liberal Party is run by the son of really our primary. You could call him a founding father of Canada. I mean, we had old founding fathers back in the 19th century, but they didn't. I mean, they built a constitution that was largely in response to the American Civil War. It didn't have things like a Bill of Rights. It was a stopgap solution. If you read the historical text carefully, you learn that even the people that built the Constitution didn't, or the initial Constitution, didn't really think this Canada thing was going to last too long. It was kind of a stopgap solution to try and allow legislation to pass because there was gridlock between Ontario and Quebec. It wasn't really designed as like a serious country kind of thing, the way that the American Constitution or the French Revolution built and erected this, society based on principles and everything. It was all very timid, all based on just British constitutionalism. And eventually in the 70s and very early 80s, we had a prime minister, his name was Pierre Trudeau, who laid all these things down, pulled us out of, technical British sovereignty, and built the country. 200 years from now, when people talk about the founding fathers of Canada, they're not going to talk about, John A. Macdonald or I can't even remember any of they're obscure. Most Canadians don't even know who they are. Who was there was one in Nova Scotia that ran an anti-confederalist party. But anyways, in 200 years, people are going to look back and they're going to say the founding fathers were Pierre Trudeau, Lougheed out in Alberta, and the other people that were involved in writing the Constitution, including another prime minister that we had a little bit later called Jean Chrétien. He was actually very involved in that, and he doesn't really get the credit that he really ought to get. And I think that history will probably correct that as time goes on. So his son is the new prime minister. Now, he doesn't really have a lot of experience. I don't think he's written any private member bills even. He doesn't have any legislative experience, which is very, very, very strange in the Liberal Party of Canada, which has run the country for almost continually since like 1920, or certainly since 1945 anyways. It's just like small little blips of conservative, almost like interregnums, while we allow the Liberal Party to find itself again, kind of thing. Every 20 years or so, we do that. We throw the Liberals out for 5-10 years, and then we put them back in for another 20 years, right? So this is unusual, okay? But the media narrative is really focusing on this fact that, he was not ready, unquote, as though we were electing a king that is in total control of the government. It's got I can't remember my Hindu gods here. Is it Shiva or Vishnu with all the arms? Either way, this idea that it's just like total control centralized in the office of the prime minister, right? Which is a Tory idea, and something that the Conservatives have been pushing forever. That was the basis of the difference between the Liberals and the Conservatives, or the Whigs and the Tories, was the idea that the Tories were very much into this idea of a king, the supremacy of kings, and all of the whole religious nonsense that went through it. And the Whigs were all about the supremacy of Parliament, and the idea of having the country run by cabinet positions, a decentralized parliamentary government, right? So this guy comes in. He's the son of the great founding father. And there's all this sort of like aristocratic pomp around it, but all he's been saying since the start is, listen, I'm a liberal/Whig. I believe in the supremacy of Parliament. I'm not running things from the office. I'm going to decentralize things. There's going to be free votes in Parliament. I'm going to have capable ministers that are going to run their own files. They're going to report to me and everything, but I'm not running the government from. I'm not the king, right? The media is completely ignoring this, right? And I think it's partly from all of these years of conservative advertising and messaging, of this. I mean, the Stephen Harper's major sort of advertising platform was this idea of strong leadership to control the economy. It doesn't sound like what you would associate with with the right wing in the United States, but it's very Tory. Um, this idea of a strong executive power. It's always been very Tory. That's, like I say, that was the major difference, and we're seeing it come out here. But I think that even more than that, the major reason is because the media is Tory. It's old Tory from the ground up, from the top down. At its core, it's just it's a totally like old money, old ideas. It's run by people that live in mansions, never worked a day in their life, kind of thing. I mean, that's just what the way our media is. It doesn't have the same sort of. I guess I would hesitate to refer to the American media as a free market. It's not. It's an oligopoly. But even so, it's still run largely on market principles. In Canada, it's an old elite. It's an old guard. It's totally old Tory, right? So they're continuing to push this idea of this like anointed leader. I mean, they were initially pushing the conservative messaging, but then when he comes in, it's all like anointing and everything else. Um, Completely missing the point that what we've done here is we've returned to parliamentary democracy as Whigs, as liberals, always implied, always demanded. I mean, as Whig positions, they've changed on things like trade, government control in the economy, social services, all these sorts of things. Like Whigs and liberals, there's been massive, evolution of ideas. But the one thing that Whigs and liberals have always held to, that was fundamental to their core, was parliamentary supremacy. And it's going to be interesting to see how that actually plays out in the media, and to see if Canadians actually respond to it. Because being so close to the United States, we do, a lot of us. I mean, I'm a nerd. I read stupid amounts of things all over the place. I know the difference. But broadly speaking, Canadians do kind of play into this whole American idea of the Prime Minister being a president, having executive power to, push through whatever they want. And in fact, in practice, our system does allow the Prime Minister to put through legislation faster because the House is not independent. The Prime Minister is the leader of the largest House in Parliament, and we only have one House of Parliament. So if the Prime Minister, tables something, then there's not another body to reverse it. So long as the Prime Minister has a majority, it will pass. But nonetheless, it's still all rooted around this idea of parliamentary supremacy, of having all of the power decentralized into ministries and offices, and they work together. They have common goals and everything. They're in the same party, but it's not one person rule. And I mean, I don't even think the British continue on with this kind of narrative. It's even gone there, but it's still really at the core of our politics. And it really kind of ties into this idea of the Liberal Party of Canada being it's a strange relic of the past. It's a capitalist party. There's a lot of criticisms you can put into it, but Canada is widely regarded as one of the better places to live in the world. And a lot of it has to do with the fact, we're certainly ahead of our southern neighbors in most social metrics by a good ways. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that our Liberal Party is a liberal party that holds to liberal ideas, and that's rare. Certainly couldn't say that about the Democratic Party. It's a moderate conservative party at best. In fact, the Liberal Party has more in common historically with the Republican Party. Just the fact that they both came out of the Whigs, they were both market-driven parties initially, but we held to those 19th century ideals here in ways that they weren't held to in the United States. They had the whole robber baron period where they accepted the ideology of free markets, but they didn't accept any of the obligations. Like if you read Adam Smith, he's in favor of public ownership of things like utilities and stuff. Things that are for the social good, right? And we held more to that up here, and so it's hard to understand these kinds of ideas unless you know a little bit about 19th century British liberalism, which most people don't. Even most Canadians don't. They don't really realize what it is that this represents. So it's just amazing to me that it's been hundreds of years. We're on a different continent, but we're still basically rehashing the same basic Tory-Whig division that began the parliamentary system in Britain. And I don't really think there's anywhere else, out of all the places in the world that have adopted, the British parliamentary traditions, there's really nowhere else in the world that has held as close to the initial division between Liberals and Whigs holding for parliamentary supremacy and Tories holding for strong executive leadership. That's something that if you're paying attention to it from a distance, you might want to kind of jot that down and see if you can pick up on that narrative. Certainly I'd like to see the media here jot that down and pick up on that narrative. I just got a response from the endocrinologist in London, and he's going to refill the prescription until June. So this is good. Everything worked out. That means that I have some time to figure things out here. I will need to see him again before, if he wants to fulfill it longer than June. But hopefully I can find somebody here so I don't need to go all the way down there. So that's positive, and it worked out. All right. So unfortunately I managed to screw this up. I disabled the clock, or the, well, it's not the clock, it's this streaming thing. And I can't turn it back on. Normally disabling a driver in here does something like that. You put an X on it. But for these system drivers, once you disable them, they disappear. And I've tried basically everything, and I don't know how to bring it back. Now the effect that I'm getting right now is I'm not able to get those highs again, and I am pretty much convinced that it's related to this, but there's nothing I can do to get it to load. You see this one here? I was able to disable that, just like to stop the service or delete the service, and then when I reinstalled the drivers, it came back up and asked me to reinstall it. And it should have done that for the streaming proxy as well, but it's just not. Because I have no idea how to get that back, even taking it out and putting it back in, it's just not being read. I've tried the add hardwares. I don't know how to get this back, and it might be something that I've disabled. So I'm going to have to reinstall this machine. That's actually something that I can run through here, because I've got it all set up automatically. I just need to make sure that there's nothing I want to put aside, and I don't think there is. I'm going to have to do a reinstall. Right, so this is the load up process here. I've got my boot selector coming up. I'll trim my DVD here. Press any key. It's actually a fairly interesting process in its own if you're nerdy enough to enjoy this sort of thing. You probably noticed that I'm actually running Windows XP. It's easy enough to tell me just upgrade already, but in fact, I definitely want to stick with XP for driver issues, for other issues as well. I kind of purchased this machine in the period where, excuse me, kind of purchased this machine right in the period between when XP was dying and Vista was still coming up. So it's that first generation of Vista stuff or the last generation of XP stuff. Um, and because there was such a big change, a lot of the hardware that came out during that sort of transitional period um, doesn't really work right on Vista. It has to do with the change from user mode um, drivers to kernel mode drivers. And it was a big deal for hardware manufacturers because Microsoft didn't really put out any documentation. So all the developers were stuck in this position where they didn't know how to write drivers for the new system. And with all of, I think I mentioned once that I worked, or maybe it wasn't here, but I worked tech support for Microsoft during the Vista switchover. Um, and all the problems people had, Vista had this terrible reputation. It was just because, it wasn't really it was the operating system, but the real problem that people had, and millions of people had, and still have with their older hardware, is just simply that the drivers didn't work right. And they would call Microsoft and they say, well, this worked on XP, why doesn't it work in Vista? Or even that I just purchased this machine. I have to check my partitions here. So C, D, E, that's F, and then G, H, I, J, K, L, M, and O. Okay. Yeah, because the script is set to the partitions, so I have to make sure that they're all right. And they are. Okay. Okay. So yeah, it's just set up to an install partition. It's 50 gigs. As you can see, I only ever really use about 30, but there's lots of space there if I want to install more stuff. There's three 250 gigabyte drives in here. That's something I lost a drive about a year ago, and it was set up to have four 250 to have a terabyte. And keep in mind that in 2007 that was pretty high end. But I want to move to what are those newer drives called? These are old discs. They're SATA discs, but the ones that are flash. I can't remember what they're called, but that's kind of in the next pile of stuff list. But yeah, anyway, so the big problem in the transition from XP to Vista was, and this is something that's still not really widely known. Largely, when I was doing the phones, Microsoft said don't tell anybody this, but and I don't really know if it ever got out. But the big issue, and it's still an issue with people with older hardware, is that the hardware manufacturers did not know how to write kernel mode drivers, which was a switch. So they wrote everything in user mode, and what that did was it just slowed everything down if it worked at all. So because this particular machine was built right in that transition period, it didn't get support. By the time they had figured it out, they moved on to the next gen of stuff, and it just never happened. Particularly with me, the way that works is it's with the board. It's an Asus board. I don't remember what type it is. Actually, I think I've got my. Actually, I think I said my other board was P5B. It's not. This is the P5B. I can't remember what the hell that one is. But this is that's what that is. And the it's the drivers with what are they called? The chipset. It's the chipset drivers. They updated them, but they never really fixed it. I'm if I try to install Vista on this machine, the copy operations, and this is one of the one of the issues people have with not just with Vista but with Windows 7 is that when you try to install it on an older machine, the copy operations across drives or even across partitions is just slow as hell. It takes like a day to copy any significant amount of information, and the reason is because it's operating in user mode, but the operating system expects it to be operating in kernel mode, and the manufacturers just never fixed it, right? So I'm kind of stuck with XP on this machine for that reason. And I did actually try to install Vista on here a little while back with the updated chipset drivers, and it's the same issue. It's just slow as hell. Now, all of these manufacturers did fix all of that eventually. If you buy a new machine with Windows 7 on it, you can't tell. But because, like I say, I'm in that trend, that crossover period, this particular piece of hardware got stuck in a kind of a black hole. It's not just that. This device, for the longest time, only had 32-bit XP drivers. They did eventually update them to 64-bit Vista drivers. And if one day when I decide I want more RAM, I will update to 64-bit, probably 64-bit XP, but and I will be able to do it. But I mean, that was the other reason why for years I just stuck with XP, because I couldn't get better drivers. There's some other devices in here that I don't know if they have newer drivers, but that kernel user mode thing is a big deal. It's you really can't. I mean, you can, but you really shouldn't be using XP drivers on Windows 7 or other or on Vista or other modern Windows operating systems. They might work, but they won't work right. They'll be slow, buggy, and it's really just the switch over. And that has it has an overall effect on the machine as well. It's just a question of mass numbers of cycles. This is something that you run into this with people. They think that the newer the operating system, the faster it should run. If you think about that for a second, it doesn't make any sense. When you upgrade your operating system, you're adding more things to it, so it's doing more things at the same time, and that will actually slow it down. I can't install 98 on here because it's got a SATA drive, but I did try, and I mean the install is just it's like a 5-minute install. And if I was to take this XP and put it on like a brand new machine, I mean it would be done installing in minutes, right? This is a Win-lighted install, so I can show you how that works. What you'll see is all kinds of stuff kind of jumping up, but I mean there's no user input involved. I actually mostly have it's mostly open source software on here, and a lot of it is actually it replaces the Windows stuff. So I completely disabled the Windows burner and put IMG burn on there instead. I completely disabled Windows Media and put foobar on there instead. The Windows movie player is completely gone. It's been replaced with SM Player, which is another Linux thing. And that's what the bulk of the software on here is. It's Qt software that's been ported from Linux to Windows. I actually seriously considered installing Windows on this machine. Linux on this machine. But again, I needed the driver support for Windows. For a while, I had it dual booting or triple booting into one of those Mac OS X hacks. I eventually deleted it just because I never used it. I thought maybe it might be good for audio or whatever, but I never really found a use for it. So it sat on there for like a year. It worked. I could connect it and everything. I just I did everything Windows. Um, I've never actually timed this. I know it's not a long process, yeah. So that was I guess the base install, and it took what, 5 minutes? A lot of it's gone. Um, it's on a DVD with a lot of extra software, but I mean the actual basic Windows is like it's like 50 megabytes left. It's doing hardware there. This is actually very important to make sure that it gets it here because I delete so much stuff. So it's got to catch all the hardware now. And I modified my install script this time so it's not deleting those drivers. And I'm curious as to what it sounds like right out of the box like that. In fact, I'm going to stop before I finish my final script and try it there. See what happens. I had done this 100 times previously. It's just I had always deleted those drivers. In fact, I do think that a lot of what I've mixed over the last year and a bit is on a broken system. It sounds good though. I mean, I don't know if it's just a... It does sound the way it's supposed to though. So I mean, I think a part of it is realizing that what's broken is in Windows media rather than ASIO, right? I don't think ASIO is using any of these things. So what I'm fixing is just the playback. To an extent, maybe I am sort of wasting my time. I could probably do the mixing, but the thing is I can't be sure that what I'm getting on playback sounds right. If I'm not able to get a stable system this time, this is kind of my last check. I will just have to jump to ASIO and go from there, kind of thing. Expecting it to be, well, I was expecting more banners and stuff to show up. It's all automated, so there's no input, but yeah, there we go. So that was a math program called Graph that allows you to make graphs. There's actually a substantial programming element in what I do. It's been put onto the side for right now as I'm going through older stuff, but it's going to be one of the things that's going to be coming up relatively soon once I get back to picking up where I left off, which was in about 2003. What I'm doing, actually, maybe I should explain that. What I'm doing right now, when I moved down here, I had years worth of half-finished recordings. So I started at the very beginning in 1996, and I worked my way up all the way to 2003, which is just like hours and hours of music. It's about 50 releases over that period. And I'm just cleaning up things, completing things, finishing things. And I got to the point where I was needing to, compile, periods. There was kind of a period from about 1996 to about 1999 that's self-contained, and then one from about 1999 to 2003 that's self-contained. So I split those up into periods, and I was going to put them together onto Blu-ray discs and package them as period compilations. But I realized that there was still one more idea that I had to complete for the 96 to 99 period, so I went back to do that. and that's where I've been stuck at ever since because that's where my computer broke. Um, but once that is complete, then I'll be thrown back into 2003, which is going to be relatively quick from there, all the way up to about 2007 because there's just not a lot there, right? So then after 2007, there's a lot of ideas that are barely even started. Um, but in a sense, they're also what I was working on already. Um, the last major piece I completed was in 2011, and it's something I've been working on since 2007. So I'm kind of almost back where I started, kind of thing. Um, and this is just about to come up. I have little notes attached to the script to remind me what to do, so that'll be the first thing you see here. Well, besides the error telling me that the file's not there, that's fine. I mean, Internet Explorer is completely ripped out. This is the only machine that I've ever seen where you actually honestly cannot get on the internet from Windows. You have to use Firefox. It's the only way. I was very thorough about ripping that out. Okay, so that comes up there. Close that down. And first thing I need to do is set a static IP. It's still not plugged in, but that doesn't matter because it's static. I just need to make sure that nothing is owned by my previous logon, because that tends to create problems when it comes up. Make sure that's from there. I think that was the error I made. Yeah, see, I don't want that. I want to own it. Close that down, and I need to make sure I've got the right time zone here. Yeah, I had set it to Central Time when I set this up because I was moving from Ottawa to Windsor, and it's almost an hour difference. So I was used to the sun coming up earlier. So I set it to Central Time. I've gotten used to living here, but it was annoying when it started. Alright, so then that's my startup there. Close that. And there's my chipset. NVIDIA card. This is the sound card. The internal sound card, or at least one of them. Right. It's just going to run a few registry hacks. That file extensions hack. Make sure that everything opens with the proper thing. And the rest of it was just stuff like setting the screensaver and the power management, that kind of stuff. Right, so that was step one. Do a restart here. Okay, so first, let's get this in there. I haven't broken the plug and play yet, so it just installs normally. Now this run through is mostly software, so that was the first install part. I copied over my virtual machines. They're on a separate hard drive there. You saw me change the ownership. I need Java for my pod. This is just for I mostly like the AB and Notepad++. MATLAB is something I've used for a few things. One of the things I'm going to be doing, hopefully within the next year, is an entire project based around MATLAB. I had plans to do that. I took a course in wavelet design in 2004. And my project, it was actually a fourth year course. Um, my project was to create a piece of music. It's up on YouTube and on Bandcamp. It's two different ways to get to infinity. Although I think the um, title I called is this. Yeah, it's the spontaneous combustion of Leonardo. Uh, I can't remember if I used it as Fibonacci or Tibisano. Um, it's called that because it uses a lot of Fibonacci sequences, um, along with the numbers of pi and e and some other constants. Um, uh, Different ways to get to infinity using different speeds. This is a sound editing program. This is Sonar, which is not being used except for the plugins, the VST synths specifically. Ableton is something that I never really got around to using much yet. Um, I just haven't had a reason to. Um, it's just not clear what I would do with it that I can't do with Cubase. I do have it installed though. It's mostly in case I come into situations where I need something from it. I'm downloading a loop or something that's in that format, but I've never used it in an actual song. There's a fragment that I've used it in, but it hasn't been finished yet. Audio mulch. I have used audio mulch, but it's been a long time. Around the year 2000 or so. I like the interface. I haven't had much of a use for it recently. Actually, and I used it around 2003 as well. Since I moved here, I've been focusing mostly on MIDI stuff and sound editing stuff. I haven't used it recently, but I have used it in the past, and I will use it again. One song with use of audio mulch is Gravity's Rainbow. Cool Edit. Now that is a program. This is actually Cool Edit Pro 2. I can't remember what year this is from. 99. This was the first piece of software that I downloaded. I've been using it forever. It used to be my main DAW. It's really the center. Nowadays Cubase is the center, but it's one of the more important pieces of software that I use. You can hear it all over stuff from about 98, actually from about 97 up until about 2006, which is almost everything. Not so much in the redone stuff that I've done over the last year, which is mostly dated from, I guess, about 2001 to 2003. But I've made large use of this. Noteworthy Composer. This is my score writing / sequencing program. I use it to write scores and edit MIDI files. Been using this since, again, 1997. We'll open it up and show you. How that works. And it's just a very simple score writer. The reason I like it is because of this. See? Seems like a simple thing, but so few score writers allow that. Okay. This is Reactor, which, again, I've been meaning to get my head around it, and I haven't ever actually used it for anything. What Reactor does is it lets you build your own synths out of oscillators and generators and things of the sort. The way I tend to work is I go looking for a sound, and if I can find the sound out of. Well, I mean, I guess that recently I've been using VST sequencing mostly to mimic orchestral sounds. So it hasn't really come up. I haven't been doing much IDM techno type stuff. It's been mostly jazz or classical. When I pivot back into this, and it could be a while, this will become important. But for right now, I haven't been using it, and I don't think I've ever used it. This is Fruity Loops, which again, I'm installing only really for the plugins. That I use them from time to time in Cubase. It's really the only part of it that I use. This is a program called Leaf. It's a simple drum machine that I've used a few times in the past. It should have launched, I believe. Where'd it go? Yeah. Oh, that's what happened. Okay. It's just a very simple pattern drum machine, but what I liked about it was that it had a bunch of effects on it. As you can see, it's dated to 1999, so at the time this was actually pretty useful. I've used it on a few tracks, most prominently on the track Curious George. Allows you to put your own samples in. It's a very simple program, but it's quite useful. This is a tab editor, which as a guitarist has been useful to me, just to get ideas down. I don't use it as much anymore. I more just use regular score writers for guitar parts now. This is a strange program called Sounder. What it does is it lets you create little buttons here and then throw them around. And then as they hit off the wall, they trigger notes, and you can set the different notes for what you want. It's a remarkable little program, and I've used it actually quite a bit. I don't use it as much anymore now, just because I've been using score writing programs far more often. But it had quite a bit of use in quite a few different programs, both as mostly as a sound generator and a soundscape kind of background. Now here's all my plugins. Guitar rig to start off with. Okay, so my batteries went out there on me, and I lost the part on the DR008. This is a drum machine. What's nice about it is that it has a whole lot of patches from old drum machines. It's really just a sampler, and it can be connected to the pads. That's the idea with it anyways that I wanted to use it for. I haven't really used it for anything yet, but again, that's another thing that will be used in the future. I am quite certain of it. In fact, I think the next thing that I'm going to do will probably use this relatively deeply. For right now, the kit stuff I've done has mostly just been looking for regular kit sounds. The next one I think is going to be a little bit more exotic. Okay, and that's just copying files. Actually kits. So as you can see, I went out of my way to ensure that I had everything I needed for the drum machine, or for the drum kit, anyways. This is Bandstand. It's essentially it's a sound card emulator, and what it does. One of the annoying things about Cubase is that it doesn't let you hook files directly up to your MIDI card. What this does is it allows you to basically do that. And on top of that, the sound fonts are a little bit nicer as well. And Guitar Rig 5. I use Guitar Rig 5 mostly for bass. What's coming up here is a guitar emulator. This was for, normally I would play guitars live, but it is useful to have this if I'm doing specifically MIDI projects to get good guitar tones. I've got some specialized string libraries and horn libraries and stuff, but being a guitarist, it's the guitar tone that I'm going to be the most picky about. This is the second part of it. The first one was for electric guitars. This is for acoustic and nylon string guitars. Hyperprism is a set of DirectX plugins. There's a number of interesting things on there. One thing I've used quite a bit is the granulator in this. It's quite a nice granulator with some very nice effects. So we skipped a lot of plugins. As you can see, I actually have the filing process scripted. So it's going through and it's putting all of the files in the place that I want them in, organized by type, so that when I go to open up Cubase, it's not just a big giant mess. And then we got my mixer drivers. Now, I'm not actually going to install the Line 6 drivers. I'm just going to put them in the driver store. There's a reason for that. It has to do with being a little bit unsure if there might be a driver conflict there. I think I've more or less ruled it out, but regardless, I don't need it right now. This is Sound Diver. It's for editing, mostly for editing the Elisa's head. And this is to edit the JXXP. It's in German, as you can see. It's not a big deal. That's the FLAC driver. And some extra things there. So I've got the thing set up so that I'm testing it on the clean reinstall before the third script. And it's sounding better. I'm not getting any fade on the highs, which was the thing I was fighting with. I've also got my lows back. That was kind of an issue on the last install, was that the low disappeared. I wasn't really talking about it much. I kind of figured it would come back when I fixed it. It's back here, and it makes a big difference, and it's huge. But it sounds kind of weird. So what I'm doing, I just reinstalled the FireWire connector. I'm hoping that actually makes it sound better, but I'm a little bit worried that it might sound worse. If it does, I don't really have an answer besides having to do this again. Certainly the way it was right up to now is better than it's been in a while. That's even with the caveat of me saying before that it was, after listening to it right now, it wasn't even close last night. I thought it was, but it really wasn't. Big difference. And it's funny like this because, you listen to things and you look for cues and everything, but when you really hear it sound right, it's a big difference. That said, it is still sounding kind of funny, like it's like there's some kind of sample rate conversion happening, or the signal's being blocked somewhere. It's just this kind of weird compression. So I'm looking to isolate that first. After that, what I'm doing is I'm running through the script one section at a time. So this is a pretty big script. I've actually already taken a bit of it out, but it was just like deleting temporary files and stuff. This is kind of the runs of the core of it, and it's just deleting file after file after file, and then it's running through a lot of registry hacks afterwards. So what I need to do is I need to do like a section at a time. So the next section up is going to be just networking files, and it's just stuff like Windows comes with all this stuff for like just weird networking things, and a lot of like obsolete networking things as well. So things like Telnet. A lot of it is just stuff that, the only thing on your machine that's ever going to use that is a virus. So you might as well just get rid of it. This is not the cause of it. If it's a cause, here it might be maybe in the Windows Media Player stuff. Off chance it might be a WMI issue. Or maybe something that I've got misfiled somewhere. It could be maybe a service. As you can see, I'm deleting a lot of services. but I really think it was probably this here. Working with this, well, I gotta test it. I'll find out. But it is certainly better now than it's been in a while. I need to make sure that I am keeping the highs not fading and the lows present as I go through and I test. But that's what I'll be doing. I'm running through this chunk by chunk until I get to the end, and I either find something or I don't. That's going to take me for most of the rest of the night. I will get this up before I fall asleep, but that might not be until a little bit later. I'm hoping to catch a Jimmy Chamberlin concert tomorrow in Detroit. It's a saxophone guy named Frank Catalano. He's got Jimmy Chamberlin drumming, along with the bassist from Brand X, and also he was also the bassist on the bulk of the Brian Eno records in the 70s. His name is Percy Jones. He's a session musician. Played a lot with Phil Collins. Phil Collins and Percy Jones were kind of a solid rhythm section. And because Jimmy Chamberlin picks a lot up from Phil Collins, I'm very much interested into hearing what that sounds like. Probably the closest thing you're gonna find to a Collins Jones section nowadays would be a Chamberlain Jones section. So I'm a little bit excited about that. Small place, so foot from Jimmy Chamberlin. I grew up a big Pumpkins fan, so that's big news to me. So I mean, I can't be up too late. I gotta get some sleep before I do that tomorrow. But I mean, I've got a plan here. I am focused on it. I gotta do this. I also need to eat because I haven't eaten in more than 36 hours, or roughly 36 hours. Again, that's not abnormal for me. You saw how much I eat when I do eat, and that's how it goes. So I want to at least, if I find a problem, I'll stop. If I don't, I could be doing this until 4 o'clock in the morning, and I will need to eat before I go to sleep. So this is not the end of it. There will be a food section, but I'm getting to the end of it. It is currently perfect. Like perfect. Excitedly. So, what I had to do is I had to, when I first redid the Firewire driver, it came back the same way it was before. So I redid it again, and this time I went through the registry and I removed all of the mixer references from the registry, and then I reinstalled it from there, and now it's ideal. What I need to do whenever I do, and then I flashed the firmware as well, and it got me just like perfect sound. So what I need to do now is restart the machine. I know that it sounds foolish to step away from a perfect sound, but I need to make sure that it's stable. So what I will find when it comes back up is whether or not it broke on the reboot, and I have had that happen before. So I am apprehensive about it. I currently have a DLL in place that will register the various system devices. If it breaks, it pretty much has to be due to that. That's something that I'll find out. I mean, the answer is to remove that file, but I do kind of think I want it there. Again, it was something that was removed in the initial install script and taken out because I thought maybe it might help fix it, but let's see here. Moment of truth. It won't take long to find out. I lost the grit. I lost the bottom end. See, it still sounds better though. I should be getting. Yeah, yeah, the highs sound good as the lows. Damn it. Actually, silly me. I had it set to the other card. It actually is getting a good sound out of this. Um, I'm not sure why the other card just crapped out on me. Um, but this one is sounding good. So, I need to do a little testing, but it sounds, I think, right. Yep, absolutely perfect sound at midnight. Um, I still got some listening to do, and hopefully I get through the script by the end of the night, and hopefully it's still sounding perfectly. So it's after 2 o'clock in the morning, and I kind of got to the point where I need to eat. Um, I think I'll still be up a while, and I should hopefully still get an answer to what I'm doing. But I was going to make a meal, a type of spaghetti using a frying pan. I won't tell you exactly what it is, but as you can see, my spatula broke a little while back. It was actually just a few days ago, and it wasn't anything more complicated than dropping it on the floor, and it shattered. Um, so that is going to have to wait for another day. I can probably pick some up the next day, not tomorrow, but the next day. Um, and I can get to making that special spaghetti dish then. For today or tonight or this morning, it's gonna have to just be the regular old default spaghetti, and we already went over that. Um, this is likely the end of the vlog for tonight. I'm gonna have to edit it before I get back onto the computer, and I'm not certain that I'm gonna be able to stay awake that long. So if that's the end of it, then later.